If you've ever studied highly successful people, the elites in their field across business, sports, or finance, you'll notice a common response pattern to the challenging situations they face. Some people I can think of would be like Richard Branson or J.K. Rowling, or even the Beatles. Their story of how they actually struggled in the beginning is fascinating. When you look at all these elite performers, they have specific psychological adaptations which help them thrive and be successful where others would struggle. One of those psychological adaptations is optimism, and it's a mindset you'll need to succeed, whatever your chosen work, whether it's business or sports or trading, or it doesn't matter. It's a special mindset that continually gives you an edge mentally, physically, emotionally. Now, that doesn't mean that optimism is a solve all your worldly issues mentality, and that's not what I'm trying to purport here. I'm not trying to say you should ignore key facts or problems. But when it comes down to it, optimists consistently outperform pessimists, and it's a mindset you'll need to succeed. So whether it's for trading, poker, sports, or business, it doesn't matter. After this video, for those of you that are serious about success, you'll want to become more optimistic in your mindset. So in today's lesson, I'm going to share some of the most cutting-edge research on optimism and how you can use it to make more money and succeed in life. Then, towards the end of it, I'm going to share 2 key tips on how to build your optimistic mindset, so make sure to watch this video to the end. So let's go ahead and jump into this and begin by talking about the nature of optimism. So there was this great study about optimism and money that was done by Manju Puri and David Robinson out of Duke University. And what they were finding was that again and again across various fields, optimists would earn more money than pessimists. And what they would also find is that optimists worked longer and harder towards their goals. Now, if you think about it, this makes sense intuitively, because if you're an optimist, you're going to be more deeply engaged in your work, and you're going to look at the work that you're doing as a meaningful step on your path to success. And so, it contrasts that to a pessimist who doesn't think that this is going to get them to where they need to. They don't see how it does that. And they're not going to be looking at, their work is super meaningful because they don't believe that they can kind of create the reality that they want to. So when we look at the nature of optimism, an optimist is someone who has positive expectations about the future. And on top of this, and more importantly, I might add, is as an optimist, you believe you can effectively make decisions and take actions that will lead to your success. In other words, you believe you can make it happen. You contrast this to a pessimist. A pessimist is someone who has lesser expectations for their future, and they're also less likely to believe that they can change their life or future for the better. And so Puri and Robinson really kind of set out to see if they can demonstrate this and validate it. And they were finding that optimists consistently outperform pessimists across many fields of work. And so then they decided to broaden the study and extend it towards children. What Puri and Robinson had found was when they went to study children, they had realized that optimistic children are performing better in school, they had better grades, and they were also engaging in more healthy activities like sports or social engagements. And so it wasn't just something that was only around elite performers. It was across all kinds of skill levels and across all kinds of different fields. So with that being said, before I share with you some valuable insights on how you can build an optimistic and successful mindset, I want to explore 2 key features about optimism and why you need it. So the first one has to do with pervasiveness. And what pervasiveness refers to is the measure you allow setbacks, a loss, or a rejection to affect your life. Pessimists believe setbacks are permanent and will affect everything, whereas optimists believe setbacks are temporary and just another hurdle to overcome. Now, getting back to professional athletes in the study that Puri and Robinson did, They took it a little bit further, and they started testing swimmers, and they found that swimmers would actually bounce back quicker from a loss or a mistake even in mid-swim versus a pessimist. They noticed baseball pitchers and hitters would do better in pressure moments, while their pessimistic counterparts are more likely to choke. And shoot, even in Vegas, the bookies there will often give a higher point spread advantage to an optimistic basketball team versus pessimists. So this is something that's really crucial. And as I said before, optimists have positive beliefs about the future and their ability to make their goals become a reality. Because of this, they exert more effort in high-pressure situations. Now, people who have a negative belief or who are pessimistic do the opposite. They engage in wishful thinking, they worry, and they, kind of avoid things. Why, if you're a pessimist, why tackle the situation with all your effort if it's hopeless, if you don't think you can succeed? So pervasiveness is a quality that penetrates both the optimist and the pessimist, just in different ways. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is attribution. Now, with attribution, what this refers to is you will interpret an event not just by its success or failure, but also the color of your mindset, meaning whether you're optimistic in that moment or not. This interpretation and labeling that we do of these events causes behind them, or it creates this kind of attribute that we kind of view about a particular event and its outcome. Traits or skills that we have or don't have. Oh, I succeeded, I must have this skill and attribute. Oh, I failed, oh, I don't have this attribute. Now, when pessimists experience success, they attribute their success to a specific reason, such as luck, which is a word that I personally think you should abolish from your language. This whole idea of luck is some invisible, fleeting, non-tangible force that we have no control over. We have no idea when it's going to come. It's just completely random. It's either going to bless me or not. And if I don't have it, why should I try? So, it gives over your power and it takes away the capacity in your mindset to affect change because, well, it's just determined by luck. There's nothing I can do about it. So that is a pessimistic mindset when it comes to attribution. Contrast this to optimists, and what they attribute their success to is what we call key global attributes, such as I'm hardworking or I'm physically strong, which penetrate into other aspects of their lives. So if you're physically strong, like I have this one student, and he came to my London training seminar. His name's Sasha. He's one of my senior students. And he's a big guy, and he's someone who actually was not in shape, was well overweight, and then he went on this kind of mission to just radically change his life. And so he decided to go to the gym and start exercising and get proper diet, and lo and behold, now all of a sudden he's physically this just very, very robust, muscular dude. And, because of that, because he's really worked hard to transform his physical body, and he's an athlete to some degree, he believes that when it comes to other physical things that he needs to do, that he has the attributes to do that. He's more likely to believe that he can try this physical challenge and succeed. So what's the difference here in terms of attribution? Pessimists attribute success to transitory reasons, and that doesn't build a foundation of, this self-image and mindset that you can succeed. The reasons why I was successful is just this transitory thing that was coming by. It had nothing to do with me. It was just something really short term. If you think about that, how can you be confident when the reason for your success is either luck or some reason that only helped in this moment but won't help in future moments? When you kind of inverse this and look at an optimist is someone who believes that they have the skills which affect many other aspects of their lives, like my student Sasha, who could pretty much handle any physical endeavor that he was faced with. So, the pessimist thinks success is transitory due to transitory reasons or luck or something like that, whereas the optimist believes they have the skills that maybe they're not necessarily specific to this situation, but they have similar skills and experiences that they can rely upon to help in this situation. And so when you have that kind of mindset, when you rely upon that experience, you now have something that enhances your confidence that you can do it. Hey, I might not have been the best baseball player, but I felt I had enough physical skills that I tried snowboarding, and I felt pretty confident that I could do well in it. So it's not necessarily that my baseball or that my other athletic skills translated directly to movements that I would do in snowboarding, but they had this confidence in my body and my muscle memory in my mind that I can be in certain intense physical situations and handle the situation. So there's a very different, two radically different approaches and mindsets when it comes to attribution. Now, before we kind of wrap up this section on pervasiveness and attribution, and I move into the tips that you can do to build this optimistic mindset, I want to talk about a really, really good experiment regarding pervasiveness and attributes. And this is something that it's not an actual scientific experiment. I want you to do this experiment. So what I'd like you to do is to, over the next week, I want you to look at your mind, look at your thoughts, and look at your language. And then notice, do you tend to think in kind of very black and white terms like, oh, good or bad, or profit and loss? Do you look at that when it comes to losses, setbacks, or failures? Do you feel like everything is affected by a loss or by a setback or a failure? Or do you tend to look at these setbacks, these failures, these losses as just temporary before you kind of go to the next level as part of the learning process? Do you look at it as more of, hey, I either win or I learn? There isn't really a loss. The only time there's really a loss is if I don't learn from that situation. So that's a very different mindset. If you're thinking more black and white, you're probably looking and you think that this setback or loss kind of affects everything, then you're probably leaning towards a pessimistic mindset. If you think of losses as something you learn from, then you probably have a more optimistic mindset. So this is a great experiment for you to engage in about pervasiveness and attribution and see how they penetrate and permeate in your life. Now, before I get into the two tips, I'd like to also briefly mention and kind of, just kind of throw a kink in the armor here, and not to promote that optimism is this, solve everything for you. There is a downside to being too optimistic. Very much like overconfidence, being too optimistic can cause you to take too many risks or overestimate your skills. I have a very personal story about this. In college, I definitely overestimated my climbing skills, and I came up with this really not so bright idea to do a free climb up a 200-foot mountain face, and it almost ended up taking my life. In fact, the doctors were kind of shocked that I ended up surviving that. So that's a story I'll tell you another day. But it's important to not be overly optimistic than reality is communicating to us. Ironically, you see this in something that affects almost 100 million people inside the U.S. And so inside the U.S., the current divorce rate is about 50%. So 1 in 2 chance that you're going to get divorced, basically. Now, the funny thing about it is that, and it kind of makes sense, but if you were to ask any newly married couple, the chances that they're going to get divorced, they're going to say 0. And I get it. It's not necessarily the best thing to say on the day you're going to get married, because if it's the case, you probably should be really questioning it to some degree. But the thing about it is that if you have 50% of the people that are get married to, for this next year, 10 years, whatever, if half of them are going to get divorced, and yet none of them think that they are going to when they're getting married, well, then there's a disconnect there in terms of what reality is and what we believe is, kind of an optimistic outlook in terms of marriage. So, that doesn't mean we underestimate situations, but what it basically means is that we have to make sure we're appraising the situation properly. With that being said, I'd like to now share 2 key tips to building an optimistic mindset that you can start doing today in just a few minutes every single day. So the first has to do with monitoring your language. The words and language you choose while just before, during, or shortly after a high pressure moment is going to be highly revealing towards your level of optimism and pessimism and where you kind of are in that scale. And just to let you know, I don't think of it as necessarily black and white. I look at it as kind of a sliding scale with various gradients, that some things we can be more optimistic about and other things more pessimistic. When we look at the gestalt of that, where do we tend to lie in that scale? So before, during, or shortly after high pressure moments, these things kind of evoke our overall mindset and our kind of unconscious beliefs around optimism and pessimism and ourselves and our abilities. Now, ways that you can look at language to kind of detect where you are in that scale is to look for things. Do you constantly make statements like, I can't? Or do you say, I hear this a lot, when I have this, I will then be disciplined. Like when I'm successful, then I'm going to be disciplined. As if somehow you get to success by being undisciplined. Or do you say things like, success is just not for me? I had an email from somebody that said that to me recently. It actually made me very sad that, that was their mindset. I really wanted to help them get out of it, but they, felt pretty stuck in their mindset, and so to me, that was very, sad just to hear that, because, I've had that belief in my life and it's not a good place to be in. Hopefully they can recover from that and, realize that this is not such a tough situation for them. So if you use these statements like, I can't, when I have this, I'll be disciplined, or success is not for me, then you're likely pessimistic or on the pessimistic side of that scale. What you can do in monitoring your language is first observe and then kind of repackage or start to rebrand and relabel these particular statements and ideas that you have around these situations. So try and rephrase I can't to I can. Or I'll start being disciplined today, or I am being disciplined as of today. Or you can say, instead of success is just not for me, you can say there's nothing stopping me from success. In fact, if you were to say these kind of different versions out loud, the two different types, I can't versus I can, or success is not for me versus there's nothing stopping me from success. Notice how you feel when you say both of those different things. You should feel a noticeable difference when you kind of, say those two things. It should not just be something that you kind of feel in your, in your head, but it should be something you feel in your body. One should feel more empowering. One should feel very disempowering. Notice the difference. So the key here in monitoring your language is to observe your language in these moments, because they bring to the surface our unconscious and limiting beliefs about what we can and cannot do. And also using these positive versions of these statements directs your attention towards solutions and your brain's resources towards what you need to do to go to the next level. The next step you can do to build an optimistic mindset is to appreciate the challenges you experience. Now, for me, when I look back upon my life, the first real trend change I had and started moving towards success was when I started to appreciate the really hard challenges I faced in the early days of my life, the first couple decades, whether it was school, sports, or money. I look back upon that, and that was actually a very formative time for me. Before, I used to look at that as kind of like a baggage or a loss or something that didn't help me. But now I actually look at that and appreciate the things I went through, because they actually gave me skills, experiences, and a belief that I can rise again, that I can fall and get back up, that I can keep working towards my goals, and that nothing will stop that. It may take longer than I expected, but I'm going to get there. And so, ironically around this, I was once asked by someone who I really care for, they asked me, I said, where does your confidence come from? Because it's a noticeable difference, from the person I met, a decade ago. And, when I asked them what they thought about, they actually thought it was because of what I had achieved. They thought about, hey, you achieved all these things and you were able to do all these things you set out, and that's why I think you're confident. And I said, that's actually not it. I know it may look like it, but it's actually not that. And so I told them something they didn't expect. I told them that my confidence, it didn't come from getting what I wanted. It came from initially not getting what I wanted, failing miserably hundreds of times over, but then figuring it out, doing the work, and then achieving what I did. So it wasn't just like I tried and I succeeded, and because of that I'm confident. No, it was because I had failed and was able to pick myself back up and failed again, pick myself back up and keep doing this, and then eventually turn the corner that, in a very kind of stable way, that not getting what I wanted and then kind of renegotiating the situation and redigesting it and coming with a whole new attack plan. That's what built the confidence, just to be able to do that. And so it kind of changed this, it was this big pivot in my life. And that's what life is. Life pivots on certain moments and experiences. And that changed the trend for me forever. And so it was in overcoming these challenges that built this foundation of confidence. This is where appreciation comes in. And so as a whole, appreciation gives you a completely different perspective on events and life's experiences. It helps you kind of sift through the soil and find the gold in the dirt. Now, I said this many times before, and I've written about this extensively and talked about it extensively. Our brains are wired evolutionary-wise to see more negative than positive in the world and the experiences that we have in ourselves. And so when you shift your attention towards, instead of being critical and seeing the negative and finding everything that's wrong with something, when you shift it towards appreciation, you start to do a couple things. One, you help rewire this negativity bias that's wired into all of us. And two, you actually start to look for what you gained out of a situation versus what you lost. And that's a very different person and mindset that's doing that. If you're only seeing what you're lost, then you're kind of, it puts you in this negative thing. Oh, I can't get this back, or this is gone, and how am I ever going to get this back? And you're just focusing on the problem or what went wrong. But when you start to appreciate the situation and see what you gained out of it, then you don't look at that as such a bad experience. You actually look at it as something that helped you grow. Same situation, two different perspectives, two different results. So for you this week, try spending just an extra 5 to 10 minutes a day appreciating things more. And you can do this with all kinds of things. You can do this with people you know. It could be your family, your loved ones, your pets. It could be the people that you work with, the environments that you work in, the particular challenges you faced along the way. Start to see how these things made you stronger and what you learned from them. Because more than likely you're discounting what you learned from them, and more likely you're kind of giving more credence to what was lost out of the situation. We need to reverse that equation. Once you do, you'll start to take a very, different and unique perspective on those events, and you can now draw from them as a source of strength instead of them being something that pulls you down. So with that being said, hopefully now you can see how important optimism is for your success, mindset, and health. And so to review all that, I've talked about how optimists make more money than pessimists. I talked about the great study by Prury and Robinson at Duke University, how they tend to have better health and immunity, how they also attack future challenges with less doubt, fear, or worry. I've also covered a couple tips on how you can work on building your positive and optimistic mindset. And so that was monitoring your language and then appreciating the challenge. And these are things that you can perform, and you want to perform in the moments that really matter, because that's where more is on the line. That's where your success, your growth, your evolution it kind of hinders and hitches and is balancing on that moment there. And so those are the moments that kind of really determine whether you are successful or not. And the things you do before that is what allows you to perform in that moment, perform up to your abilities. So with that being said, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up below, and along with share it to anyone you know that you think could benefit from this, because there are some people out there I'm sure you know that could benefit from this type of mindset. Also, don't forget to share your feedback below along with any ideas you have for future lessons. And if you want a free lesson on how to perform under pressure, make sure to click on the link below in the description, along with subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get our latest lessons the moment they come out. And so with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you start to build a more optimistic mindset around your life. And until then, I'll see you in the next video.